In the forgotten dawn of humanity, before empires and before memory, there was a man without a name. He was not born as others were, but forged, a being of impossible purpose, created by the sacrifice of countless lives. Long before the stars were ours, in the age of myths now lost to dust, the shamans of ancient Terra faced extinction. They were the first humans to touch the warp, wielding powers that mortals were never meant to grasp. But every death, every reincarnation, drew the attention of things beyond comprehension. The predators of the Imperium. They saw the future of mankind and sought to devour it before it could bloom. Fearing the end of their kind, these shamans gathered in secret beneath the burning skies of old Earth. In that ritual, a mass suicide, an act of hope wrapped in despair, they took their own lives as one. Their souls, thousands upon thousands, merged in the sea of the warp, bound together by will and by vision. And from that convergence, something new emerged. A man, a god in flesh, a being who remembered everything. He wandered through the ages of man, unseen, immortal, eternal. He had no name, for he needed none. He walked through empires that rose and fell like waves. Egypt, Sumer, the Indus, the Imperium of man's forgotten ancestors. He was the whisper behind kings, the hand that stayed the blade of tyrants, the silent figure in the shadows of civilization's greatest moments. Where others saw superstition, he saw patterns. Where others sought gods, he saw the truth. There were no gods but the ones mankind created. And so, he began to dream of a future free from the chains of false divinity. A future where humanity would no longer crawl before idols carved from fear. Millennia passed. Humanity reached the stars and fell again. The age of strife tore the galaxy apart. Warp storms consumed worlds. Psychers were born in uncontrollable numbers, and ancient technologies were lost to madness. Civilization crumbled. Billions died screaming. And still, the immortal man endured, waiting, watching, until the time came to reveal himself. When Terra was a wasteland of techno-barbarian warlords, he rose at last. He was no longer the shadow behind history. He became history. He united the clans of Earth, not by faith, but by force, intellect, and the sheer gravity of his presence. To his followers, he was the emperor. To his enemies, he was the end of their age. The unification wars began. An age of conquest that would burn the filth from Terra and forge an empire from its ashes. The warlords of Earth wielded forbidden weapons, ancient gene beasts, and armies of enslaved psychers, but none could stand before him. He was not merely a general. He was a vision given form. Where he walked, storms quieted. Where he commanded, men obeyed without hesitation. And one by one, the tyrants of old Earth knelt or burned. Under his golden banners, the thunder of war became the song of rebirth. Cities of steel rose from the dust. The air itself shimmered with promise. For the first time in tens of thousands of years, humanity stood united under a single rule. Yet even then, he did not call himself a god. He forbade worship, destroyed idols, and crushed cults that called him divine. For he knew the danger of faith. He had seen the lies it bred, the wars it kindled. He sought not worship, but reason, progress, and unity. And so, he turned his eyes to the stars once more. Humanity, fragmented across the galaxy during the Age of Strife, had to be brought home. To reclaim those lost worlds, he would need an army unlike any ever conceived. Not soldiers, but legends. Not men, but sons. Thus began the creation of the Primarchs. 20 superhuman beings, each a fragment of his own essence, designed to embody the virtues and strengths humanity would need to rule the stars. Courage, wisdom, strength, loyalty. They were meant to be his generals, his messengers, his sons. And through them, the Emperor would carry out the Great Crusade, the reclamation of the galaxy. But the warp, ever jealous, ever watchful, struck first. The gods of chaos, the eternal enemies of order, sensed his plan. They feared what it would mean for their dominion, and so they reached into the Emperor's gene laboratories and scattered the Primarchs across the stars. 20 children, stolen, lost to the void before they could take their first breath. Still, the Emperor did not despair. If his sons were gone, he would forge their armies in their image. And from the remnants of his work, he created the Astartes, the Space Marines. Each legion a reflection of the son who would one day lead them. Each warrior a living weapon, bound by duty, fearlessness, and faith in their emperor. And when the warp storms finally broke, the Emperor led his armies to the stars. The Great Crusade had begun. He did not march for glory. He marched for mankind. The galaxy burned with the light of rebirth. From the forge worlds of Mars to the ruined cities of Old Night, the banners of the Imperium of Man unfurled across the stars. At its heart, upon the throne of Terra, sat the Emperor, not as a god, but as the guiding mind of all humanity. He spoke of unity, of reason, of a future without superstition, a future where the stars would once again belong to man. His armies were countless, the Imperial Army, the Titan legions, and above them all, his angels of death, the Adeptus Astartes. Each legion bore his gene seed, his strength, his purpose. And behind their unyielding armor, they carried something else, belief. A belief not in gods, but in him. The Great Crusade began as a flame and became an inferno. World after world was brought into compliance, some through diplomacy, others through annihilation. When the Imperium came, there was no middle ground. Worlds that accepted the truth were spared. Those that clung to old gods were burned to ash. And yet within that fire there was beauty. For a time, humanity stood united in a way it never had before. From the void ships that crossed the warp to the glittering spires of newly rebuilt worlds, there was purpose. The Emperor's light reached farther than any sun. It was during this era that the Emperor's greatest hope was rekindled. The lost sons, the Primarchs, began to be found. Scattered across distant worlds, each had grown under alien skies, shaped by their worlds into something unique, and yet unmistakably his. First came Leman Russ, the Wolf of Fenris, a savage king from a world of frost and fangs. Then Fulgrim, radiant and perfect, whose every motion was art. Perturabo, the builder and destroyer. Ferrus Manus, the iron-handed smith. And Rogel Dorn, unbending as stone. Each reunion was a triumph. Each rediscovery a miracle. And when a Primarch was found, his gene sons were given to him, for none could lead them better. The legions took on the traits of their fathers, their personalities molded by their gene sire's will. Thus, the legions became reflections of humanity's many faces, noble and savage, pure and corrupted, brilliant and doomed. Among them all stood one who shone brightest, Horus Lupercal, the first discovered and the most beloved. To him, the Emperor gave a title no one else would ever bear, War Master. He would command the Great Crusade in his stead, the Emperor said, for his own work on Terra was far from done. It was meant as a gift. It would become a curse. At its height, the Great Crusade was a symphony of light and conquest. 10,000 worlds bore the mark of the Aquila. The Mechanicum of Mars, bound by the Treaty of Olympus, provided the engines of war. Titans that strode like gods, ships that devoured the stars. The Adeptus Custodes guarded the Emperor's person, and the imperial truth spread like wildfire, the creed that there were no gods, no spirits, no miracles, only the power of man and reason. But belief is not so easily slain. On countless worlds, old faiths hid in shadow, waiting. Among the stars, whispers stirred, of unseen powers, of dreams that bled into reality. And in the warp, the gods of chaos watched and smiled. For every victory, there was a cost. For every world brought into compliance, a piece of the Emperor's dream was corrupted by ambition, pride, or blood. The Primarchs were not mere tools. They were men with hearts and flaws. Each believed in the Emperor's vision, but in his own way. And those differences, small as cracks in glass, began to widen. Then, without warning, the Emperor left the crusade. He returned to Terra, leaving his sons and his armies to continue in his name. None were told why. Some whispered he was building something, a secret project deep beneath the imperial palace. Others said he had abandoned them, tired of war. To Horus, it was a wound. To the legions, it was confusion. The Emperor's silence became an echo that grew louder with every battle fought in his absence. And into that silence, others whispered. They spoke not of logic, but of faith. They spoke of the warp, and of gods that promised power beyond understanding. They spoke of betrayal, of love, of destiny. It began with a single lie, and as all lies do, it spread like fire through dry grass. The first true wound came on Davin, a world swallowed by rot. There, Horus, the favored son, was struck down by a cursed blade. As he lay dying, his legion desperate, he was taken to the Serpent Lodge, a cult hidden in plain sight. They promised salvation. They promised revelation. And in the darkness of his fevered mind, Horus saw visions. He saw the Emperor not as a savior, but as a tyrant, one who sought to make gods of machines and slaves of men. He saw the Imperium as a lie, the Great Crusade as a betrayal. And when he awoke, the seed of rebellion had already taken root. The galaxy, once united, would soon drown in fire. But for a moment, a single shining moment, the dream still lived. The legions marched. The stars burned with hope. And the Emperor's light still reached even the darkest worlds. Men believed they were building a future that would last 10,000 years. They could not know that in less than a century, it would all be ash. For the heresy had already begun, not with a declaration, but with silence, not with armies, but with whispers. And when the Emperor looked out from his golden palace upon the galaxy he had reclaimed, he did not see the fires that waited beyond the horizon. He only saw his dream, beautiful, fragile, and doomed. From unity was born glory. From glory came pride. And from pride, the fall. The dream was already dying. It just hadn't realized it yet. The Great Crusade, once a song of unity, began to twist into a dirge of ambition and pride. The Emperor's sons, the Primarchs, who once marched as brothers beneath the same banner, now looked upon each other with suspicion. And at the heart of it all stood Horus Lupercal, the War Master, the brightest star in the Emperor's firmament, and the first to fall. When Horus returned from Davin, he was changed. To his warriors, he seemed stronger, more certain, more resolute. But those who knew him best saw it in his eyes. Something old and terrible had taken root there. He spoke now of freedom, of the tyranny of Terra, of the right of men to rule themselves. He did not yet speak of chaos. That word was still forbidden, still unseen. But its shadow lay over everything he touched. The War Master's war councils became places of quiet. Corruption. Some Primarchs resisted, loyal sons who clung to the dream their father had forged. Others, already bitter or proud, found in Horus's words the echo of their own hidden rage. Fulgrim, drawn to beauty and perfection beyond mortal reach. Angron, the slave king who only knew rage. Mortarion, the outcast who despised weakness and hypocrisy. Lorgar, the priest who once preached faith in the Emperor, now worshipped gods of another kind. And Perturabo, who saw in Horus the one brother who truly valued his genius. One by one, the seeds of treachery bloomed. What had begun as loyalty twisted into something else, devotion to darker powers, old as time, patient as the void. It began quietly, with a single order, a routine compliance. Istvan III, a world of no great importance, Horus sent his own troops, including loyalists within his legion, to the planet's surface. And then, when the signal was given, he burned it. Virus bombs fell like rain, igniting the atmosphere itself. Cities became pyres. Oceans boiled away. The screams of the loyal Astartes were silenced in fire and ash. It was the first blood of the Horus heresy. The moment when the dream of the Imperium finally died. But not all perished. Some survivors fought their way through the ruins. Garviel Loken, Saul Tarvitz, and others who would later be remembered only as ghosts. They fought not for victory, but for the truth, to warn Terra, to tell the Emperor what his beloved son had done. And for that, Horus vowed to hunt them to extinction. If Istvan III was betrayal, Istvan V was damnation. There, the loyalist legions gathered, those who still believed in the Emperor's cause, the Raven Guard, the Salamanders, and the Iron Hands, led by 3 loyal Primarchs, Corvus Corax, Vulcan, and Ferrus Manus. They came to crush Horus's rebellion before it spread. They believed their brothers stood beside them. They were wrong. When the signal came, half the gathered legions turned their guns upon their own. The betrayal was total. The plain of Istvan became a slaughterhouse. Ferrus Manus faced Fulgrim, his brother, his friend, and fell. His head taken by a blade that would one day be called Lair's blade, cursed with the touch of Slanesh. Bree, the Raven Guard, were torn apart by Kurz's Night Lords. The Salamanders burned beneath Perturabo's guns. By the battle's end, 3 loyal legions were broken beyond repair. The age of the Imperium's innocence was over. The worlds once loyal to Terra now raised Horus's banner, turned temples into slaughter altars, their priests chanting praises to new gods. Bree, the World Eaters, descended into madness, their warriors mutilating themselves in the name of Khorn. The Death Guard became harbingers of plague, carrying Nurgle's gift across the stars. The Emperor's children drowned in excess, their songs of devotion turning into screams of ecstasy. And the War Master, once a symbol of unity, became the chosen of chaos, the first among equals in damnation. Loyalty became a sin. Faith became madness. Everywhere, the warp bled into reality, twisting flesh and metal alike. The Emperor's dream had curdled into nightmare. And then, as all tragedies must, it came full circle. The traitor legions, their fleets numbering in the thousands, descended upon the cradle of mankind, Terra. The skies of the throne world burned for 7 months. The Imperial Palace, a fortress of light and marble, became a charnel house. The Blood Angels, the Imperial Palace. Fists and the shattered remnants of a dozen legions held the walls. Titans strode across the ruins. Orbital bombardments turned continents into oceans of fire. Within the palace, the Emperor labored upon his golden throne, a machine meant to bridge the warp itself, to preserve humanity's future. But when Horus came, that dream was cast aside. Father and son would meet One last time, it was said that when the War Master lowered his shields, he did so out of mercy, to end it with honor. The Emperor teleported aboard, surrounded by his custodes and chosen champions. They died, one by one. Only the Emperor remained. In the heart of Horus's flagship, amid the corpses of gods and men, the two met, father and son, creator and destroyer. There are no words to capture what passed between them. Some say Horus wept, others that he laughed. All that is known is that the Emperor held back. Even then, for he could not bring himself to destroy the child he had loved most. But Horus struck without mercy. He tore the Emperor's armor, shattered his body, and for the first time, the master of mankind bled. And then a mortal entered the chamber, a nameless warrior, a reminder of all humanity. Horus turned upon him and killed him without hesitation. It was that moment, that single act of cruelty, that broke the Emperor's heart, and in his sorrow, he unleashed his full power. In an instant, Horus was annihilated, his soul torn from existence, burned out of even the warp itself. The Emperor, broken and dying, was carried back to Terra. There, upon the golden throne, he was entombed, and the light of the Imperium dimmed forever. 10,000 years have passed since that day. The Emperor's body endures, but his voice is silent, is neither alive nor dead. A god bound in agony, a beacon that keeps humanity from falling into the warp. The legions that once bore his name are shattered. The loyal sons became chapters, bound by faith and duty. The traitors fled into the eye of terror, their souls enslaved to the very gods they once denied. The dream of unity is gone. Only war remains. And yet, in the silent halls of the Imperial Palace, beneath 10,000 layers of stone and faith, the golden throne still hums, the Astronomicon still burns, and across 1,000,000 worlds, men and women still whisper prayers to a God who will never answer, but who still watches from the dark. He dreamed of unity. He built an empire of light, and in the end, he became its god, not through victory, but through sacrifice. The fires of Terra had not yet cooled when the weight of eternity fell upon their shoulders. The Emperor was gone, entombed within the golden throne, silent and unmoving. The dream of the Imperium still burned, but it was faint, fragile, and dying. In the ashes of that broken age stood two sons, not conquerors, not gods, but builders, condemned to preserve what was left of their father's shattered dream. Rogaldorn, Primarch of the Imperial Fists, the unyielding bulwark of the Emperor's will. He had been there at the end, upon the walls of the Imperial Palace, his golden armor cracked and blackened by fire. He had watched his brothers die, one after another. He had watched the War Master fall. And he had carried his father's broken body from the field of ruin. Since that moment, Dorn did not sleep. He did not rest. He only built. To him, the Imperium was no longer a dream. It was a fortress. And fortresses, he knew, could be rebuilt. He reforged the shattered walls of the palace, not as monuments, but as warnings. Each stone laid was a prayer of repentance. Each tower raised was an act of mourning. The sons of the imperial fists became his mirrors, stern, unyielding, silent. They built the defenses of Terra so high that the very light of the sun seemed dimmed behind their ramparts. They would never allow another siege, never another betrayal. Yet inside Dorn a fire still burned, not of pride, but of guilt. He believed he had failed his father, that he had not done enough. And so he turned his pain into purpose, his grief into walls that would never fall. Far from Terra, upon the wounded world of Macragge, another sun rose from the ashes. Reboot Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, the statesman, the lawgiver, the architect of order. While Dorn built walls, Guilliman built structure. Where Dorn sought protection, Guilliman sought renewal. He looked upon the shattered Imperium and saw chaos, not just the demonic kind, but the disorder of men. Without the Emperor's guidance, the Imperium had begun to eat itself. Governors fought for power, fleets turned pirate, and corruption bled into every world. So Guilliman wrote, the Codex Astartes, a scripture of war, discipline, and control, divided the legions into chapters, small and self-contained, so that never again could one man's pride bring the galaxy to ruin. To some, it was salvation. To others, a betrayal of the brotherhood that once bound the Space Marines together. But Guilliman was not swayed. Where others saw rebellion, he saw inevitability. To him, loyalty meant order. Duty meant obedience, even when it broke his own heart. And thus, the Imperium Sanctus was born, not the dream of the Emperor, but a machine of survival, cold and eternal. Heard Rogal Dorn and Reboot Guilliman, two brothers, both loyal, both unbroken, and yet divided by their visions of loyalty itself. Dorn's faith was personal, carved in stone and blood. He served not the Empire, but the memory of the Emperor. Every fortress he raised was a shrine, every battle a confession. Guilliman's faith was institutional, not in the Emperor as a man, but in his design. He built systems, laws, and hierarchies, believing that through them, humanity could endure even without its God. One saw salvation in fortitude, the other in structure. And between them, the Imperium began to take shape, half temple, half machine. They were not brothers in spirit, but they were both necessary. For without Dorn's faith, the Imperium would crumble, and without Guilliman's reason, it would devour itself. But there was a price. Dorn stood alone upon the walls he built, surrounded by statues of those he could not save. The echoes of battle never left his mind. The thunder of orbital bombardment, the screams of the dying, the last breath of his father. He found no peace in victory, no comfort in faith. When the Inquisition came to question his methods, Dorn met them with silence. When Guilliman's Codex divided his legion, Dorn resisted, not out of pride, but out of grief. To divide the imperial fists was to tear apart what little remained of his family. The Iron Cage, that final war between Dorn and Perturabo, his old nemesis, was more than a battle. It was a test of meaning. Dorn threw himself into it not for glory, but for death. He sought release, but even death refused him. He survived and returned to his duties, scarred, broken, and quieter than before. Meanwhile, Guilliman's burden was no lighter. He governed a realm of 1,000,000 worlds, and each one cried out for salvation. He became the Lord Commander of the Imperium, a title that meant both authority and damnation. He spoke with governors, cardinals, generals, and each saw in him the shadow of the Emperor himself. But Guilliman knew better. He was no god. He was a caretaker. In secret, he wrote of his doubts. The strong lectitio divinitatis, the growing cult of emperor worship, horrified him. He had known the emperor as a man, brilliant, ruthless, visionary, not divine. But he watched, powerless, as the Imperium's faith calcified into dogma, and the man he loved became a god of lies. In time, Guilliman too would fall, struck down by Fulgrim, the brother he once called friend, left in stasis for 10,000 years, frozen between life and death as the galaxy turned to dust around him. Two builders, two burdens, both eternal. One built walls to protect the dream. The other built laws to preserve it. And both watched it die in silence. In the Imperium, loyalty is not love. It is endurance. The fires of the heresy were gone, but their smoke lingered still. In every hall of the Imperium, that smoke clung, to banners, to armor, to memory. The sons who survived carried not triumph, but silence. Among them, none bore that silence heavier than Rogel Dorn and Robout Guilliman. When the last traitor warbands fled into the Eye of Terror, the galaxy did not find peace. It found fear. The War Master was dead, yet his shadow ruled from beyond the stars. Not through armies, but through doubt. Men no longer trusted the legions. They looked upon 10,000 warriors in gold, and thought, what if they turn? What if another Horus rises? And Guilliman, ever the pragmatist, saw what must be done. He gathered the remaining loyal Primarchs, Dorn, Vulcan, Corax, Russ, the Lion, though he was already lost to mystery, and he spoke of reform. He proposed the Codex Astartes, a division of the once mighty Space Marine legions into smaller, independent chapters. No single commander would ever again command the might of 10,000 post-human warriors. No one would ever again have the power to betray humanity on such a scale. It was reason. It was order. It was survival. But to Dorn, it was betrayal. Rogel Dorn stood before Guilliman in the chambers of the ecclesiarchal hall, his golden armor cracked and dull. Behind him, his captains, grim, scarred, defiant. Behind Guilliman, a sea of scribes and strategists, carrying scrolls filled with new doctrines, new laws, new names. Divide the legions. Dorn's voice was a low growl, like stone grinding on stone. You would take what remains of our brotherhood and carve it apart? Guilliman did not raise his voice. He never needed to. The heresy was born from power without restraint, he said softly. The legions were too vast, too proud, too easily corrupted. We cannot allow it again. Cannot? Dorn stepped forward, eyes like dying suns. I will not. My sons are loyal. They bled upon these walls. They earned their name as the Emperor's fists. And yet, Guilliman replied, loyalty without structure is just faith. And faith burns as easily as flesh. The silence that followed was heavier than any bombardment. In that silence, something between them cracked. Not hatred, not even anger, but the deep, weary ache of men who had lost too much to still understand one another. The Codex was ratified, the legions were divided, and the brotherhood of the Primarchs, already fragile, was broken beyond repair. And then, in his grief and fury, Dorn sought a new purpose, and found it in vengeance. The traitor Perturabo, once brother, now Daemon Prince, had built a fortress known as the Eternal Fortress. A challenge, a taunt, Dorn could not resist. He would prove that the Sons of Terra still stood strong. The Iron Cage was not a battle. It was a tomb made of pride and pain. Dorn led his warriors into its heart, through corridors that shifted like nightmares, walls that screamed with the voices of the damned. For every iron warrior that fell, 10 fists were buried. But Dorn did not stop. He would not stop. When Guilliman's reinforcements arrived, what they found was not an army, but ghosts. The Imperial fists had broken the cage, but at a cost so severe that victory itself felt like death. Dorn returned to Terra with fewer sons and no joy. When Guilliman met him again, neither spoke. They did not need to. Each understood that the other had done what they must, and that neither would ever forgive themselves. Time passed. Empires rose and fell. Fleets rebuilt. Wars resumed. The Imperium had survived, not because it was strong, but because it was too broken to die. And in that half-life, the legacies of the two builders intertwined. From Guilliman's order came bureaucracy, the endless chains of command and decree. From Dorn's faith came the unyielding creed of loyalty, the devotion that hardened into religion. Together, they forged the paradox of mankind, a God who could not die, and a people who could not live without worshipping him. Dorn's sons became the Black Templars, crusading through eternity, seeking the Emperor's light in the darkness. Guilliman's sons became the administrators and soldiers of a galaxy-spanning regime, bound by the Codex and by faith alike. Two legacies, one of stone, one of scripture, and both immortal. It is said that Rogel Dorn disappeared in the void. His last message, sent from the bridge of his battle barge, Phalanx, spoke simply, "I go to meet him." Only his hand was ever found, still armored, still clenched in defiance. Whether he died, or still fights in the warp's endless night, none can say. Guilliman too would fall, not to war, but to betrayal. Fulgrim's blade, poisoned with Daemon's ichor, tore through him on Thessaly. His body was preserved in stasis by the faithful of Macragge, awaiting a dawn that would never come. 10,000 years would pass before that dawn arrived. And when it did, Guilliman would awaken to a galaxy far darker than the one he had built. But that is another story. They built walls to hold back the night. They built laws to hold back madness. But even builders must rest. And when they sleep, the galaxy whispers their names. Dorn, Guilliman, the builders of the Imperium. And then, for in the end, what they built was not an empire, but a tomb for the dreams of mankind. There are few miracles left in the 41st millennium. The stars are silent, the gods are cruel, and the Emperor, beloved by trillions, sits unmoving upon his throne of gold. But in the endless night, there burns a single flame. Her name is Saint Celestine, and wherever she walks, hope follows. They say she has died 1,000 deaths. They say her wings have burned to ash upon battlefields that no longer have names. They say she has fallen, pierced by daemon claws, drowned in oceans of blood, torn apart by bolter fire, and still she rises. Each time she returns brighter, holier, more distant from the mortal world. The faithful call it a miracle. The skeptics call it a weapon of propaganda. But none can deny that when Celestine appears upon a field of war, the tide turns. For her presence alone can silence fear. A single glimpse of her radiant form, golden armor cracked but shining, wings of burning light unfurled, can turn despair into fury and fury into victory. She is not just a warrior. She is a message. Faith endures. Even when the Emperor does not speak, his will lives through us. He has always been a line of conflict, and that is not the way. He was right in his instinct. Faith is not progress. He sought reason, not religion. Progress, not prayer. Yet now, 10,000 years after his ascension, it is faith that sustains the Imperium. Shrines rise upon every world. Millions die each day in his name. And above them all, his image burns, immortal, silent, divine. Celestine walks the narrow path between belief and blasphemy. She is the living proof of the Emperor's divinity, yet her existence defies everything he once stood for. If he is truly a god, then his creed of logic was false. If he is not, then her miracles are lies. And so, every time she rises from the dead, the ecclesiarchy proclaims a new triumph of faith, while the Inquisition takes careful note, whispering, "No one should wield such light in an age of darkness." The Battle of Ophelia 7 is where the legend truly became eternal. An army of the faithful, sisters of battle, guardsmen, pilgrims, stood against the heretic warlord Ardent Rex, whose demonic legions had consumed entire systems. The sky was torn with warp fire. The saints upon the cathedral walls wept molten tears. When the last bastion fell, and the enemy breached the gates, the defenders prepared for death. Their hymns were choked by the roar of chaos. Then amid the smoke, a light. Not the harsh glow of plasma or the flare of artillery, but the warm, living light of dawn. A figure descended from the heavens, her wings aflame, her sword weeping starlight. Celestine had returned. With her came her companions, the Gemini Superia, sisters, bound to her by faith and fire. Their blades sang as they cut through the corrupted, and every strike sent ripples of light across the battlefield. Those who had fallen moments before gasped and rose anew, eyes burning with zeal. Where Celestine walked, the soil turned pure. Where her sword struck, daemons screamed and faded. And where she prayed, even the dying smiled. When the smoke cleared, Ophelia 7 still stood. And every survivor swore they had seen the Emperor's hand upon her shoulder. But the galaxy does not reward miracles. The Imperium does not trust what it cannot control. The Inquisition, the shadow within the Emperor's light, summoned her to judgment. How do you live when all others die? They asked. Whose power raises you? Is it truly the Emperor's or something darker? Celestine did not answer. She only bowed her head. In the silence that followed, an Inquisitor drew his pistol and fired. The bolt round struck her heart. She fell without a cry. They buried her beneath the stone floors of the Basilica of Saint Lysandra. 3 days later, the tomb was empty. On the 4th, reports came from a world under siege. A woman with golden wings had appeared amidst the ruins, her eyes burning with divine fire. What is Saint Celestine truly? A woman blessed by the Emperor's spirit? A weapon of psychic resonance, forged by belief itself? Or something older, something the Imperium dares not name? Perhaps even she does not know. Perhaps she does not need to. For the truth of the 41st millennium is this: faith is stronger than reason. Hope is sharper than any blade. And in a galaxy where gods are monsters and angels are machines, Celestine is the last proof that humanity can still dream of. Grace. Period. End. Block quote.
I am only what they believe I am. When they pray, I awaken. When they doubt, I fall. And when they hope again, I rise.
There were once 2 warriors among the sons of the Emperor, one born of grace, the other of fury. Both were beloved. Both were doomed. Their names were Sanguinius and Leman Russ, the angel and the wolf, 2 brothers bound by loyalty, divided by fate. Sanguinius was the most beautiful of the Emperor's sons. Wings of white unfurled from his shoulders, not crafted by science or mutation, but by destiny. He was the vision of what humanity could have been had it not fallen to corruption and war. But beauty in the grim darkness of the far future is never innocent. Wherever he went, death followed. His wings were symbols of hope, yes, but also of sacrifice. On the battlefields of the Great Crusade, Sanguinius led the Blood Angels, his legion radiant amid ruin. They were poets in war, artisans in death. Their blades sang hymns to the Emperor as they struck down foes in perfect, graceful violence. To fight beside them was to witness a dance of blood and glory. And yet, behind his angelic smile, Sanguinius carried sorrow. He had seen too much beauty die, too many brothers fall. He knew, as all angels must, that wings are meant not to soar forever, but to break. Where Sanguinius was light, Leman Russ was fire, the wolf king of Fenris, the emperor's executioner. While others built empires, he broke them. He was the fury of the Imperium, given flesh. He drank, fought, and faced, and howled at the stars with the wild joy of a god who knew his own death. But beneath that savagery lay an iron loyalty, unshakable, primal, absolute. To betray the emperor was to die by his hand. To question the emperor was to earn his wrath. Russ and his space wolves were the blade in the emperor's left hand, the one used to cut down brothers who forgot their duty. When he killed, he mourned. When he drank, he remembered. Every battle scar was a prayer. Every fallen warrior, a promise whispered to the stars. Period. Despite their differences, Sanguinius and Russ shared a bond that even time could not erode. The angel and the wolf were opposites, yet reflections of each other, each seeing in the other what they lacked. Russ admired Sanguinius's grace, the calm in his eyes, the serenity that no battlefield could shatter. Sanguinius envied Russ's certainty, the way he could fight without doubt, kill without hesitation, live without fear. Period. They fought side by side across countless worlds. When the crusade was glorious, they celebrated as brothers. When it turned dark, they bled together in silence. Period. They argued often, clashed like storm and flame. But never once did either doubt the other's heart. For beneath their differences, both carried the same truth. The Imperium must endure, even if we do not. End of period. 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 Then came the Horus heresy, betrayal, war, the death of everything they had built. Horus, once their brother, now the war master turned traitor, marched upon Terra with legions of heretics and daemons. The emperor prepared to face him, but it was Sanguinius who stood first in the path of damnation. He knew what awaited him. He had seen it in visions, the black throne, the burning wings, the final fall. And still he went. Leman Russ begged him not to. He offered to lead the charge, to die in his place. But Sanguinius only smiled and said, "Brother, this is my fate. You will have your battles. I will have my end." All of this was said by the wolf. End quote. As the walls of the imperial palace shook beneath the guns of traitor legions, his armor was shattered, his wings torn. Yet still he stood. He led his blood angels not with orders, but with example. Every strike a prayer, every death a hymn. And when the final moment came, when Horus himself beckoned him into the throne room, Sanguinius did not hesitate. He faced his fallen brother, alone. The battle that followed was legend, brief, brutal, divine. Sanguinius struck with all the might of righteousness, and Horus answered with the strength of chaos itself. Wings broke, bones shattered. In his final breath, Sanguinius saw not the War Master, but the brother he had once loved. And Horus, for a heartbeat, remembered who he had been. That heartbeat would save humanity. Because of Sanguinius's death, the Emperor found his moment to strike. Because the angel fell, the galaxy endured. When Russ learned of his brother's death, he did not speak for days. The halls of the Fang echoed with silence. Then, in the dead of night, he gathered his sons and said only, "An angel has fallen. The sky itself bleeds. We hunt until the stars run dry." He led his wolves across the galaxy, tearing through heretic strongholds, avenging the fallen with feral vengeance. But vengeance cannot heal loss. It only feeds the fire. And so, one night, Leman Russ vanished. He walked into the storm of the Eye of Terror, leaving behind no body, no word, only a promise. When the wolf time comes, I shall return. The people of Fenris still tell the tale. They say he will come back when the galaxy needs him most. When the sons of Sanguinius fight their last battle, the wolf will howl again. One fought for beauty, one for loyalty, both for love. The galaxy remembers their strength, but mourns their humanity. In the end, even angels bleed, even wolves weep. For 10,000 years, the Imperium bled in silence. Its emperor, a corpse upon a throne of gold. Its people, praying to dead stars, worshipping a god who no longer spoke. And yet, beneath the crimson skies of Mars, something stirred. A whisper of code, a pulse of forbidden energy, a machine that dreamed. His name was Belisarius Call, Archmagos Dominus of the Adeptus Mechanicus, a being of logic, faith, and unholy ambition. To call him a man would be a lie. Call had long transcended flesh. His body was a cathedral of steel and circuitry, 1,000 minds nested within a single consciousness, all whispering in binary hymns to the Omnissiah. He had lived since the days of the Horus heresy, had seen the fall of brothers and the silence of gods. And across 10 millennia, he worked in secret, not for glory, not for power, but for a single purpose whispered to him in a dying dream. One day, the Imperium must rise again. Hidden in the red labyrinths of Mars and across the void, Call built what no sane priest would dare imagine. He studied the gene seed of the Primarchs, the ancient blueprints of mankind's greatest warriors. He harvested relics thought lost since the Great Crusade. He bargained with forbidden data looms. Some said he communed with the machine spirits of dead worlds. Rumors claimed he even delved into Xenos. Technology, fusing alien knowledge with human faith. Every innovation, every experiment was a step deeper into heresy. And yet, without it, the Imperium would have long since crumbled into dust. To the Mechanicus, he was both prophet and abomination. To the ecclesiarchy, a whisper of blasphemy wrapped in sanctified metal. To himself, he was merely a servant of the machine god. Then, period. For 10,000 years. Strong Robout Guilliman, the Primarch of Ultramar, lay entombed in stasis, his body broken, his mind frozen in time. Khorn watched over him. Centuries passed like heartbeats. Empires rose and died above him. But the Archmagos never ceased. Then, in the Era Indomitus, when the galaxy split in half by the Cicatrix Maledictum, when the sky itself tore and the warp screamed, Khorn's work was complete. Using technology the Imperium had long forgotten, the armor of resurrection, the stasis field stabilizers, and the pulses of a living sun, he dared to do what no mortal could, wake a Primarch from the dead. The ritual was both science and prayer. Binary hymns echoed through the forges as rivers of plasma flowed like holy water. Servitors chanted in mechanical tongues, and when the chamber's light turned gold, Guilliman opened his eyes. A god had risen again, and with him the Imperium stirred from its endless nightmare. The galaxy trembled. Many hailed Khorn as a savior, a prophet of Mars who had delivered mankind from the brink. But others whispered darker thoughts. What had he truly done? What price had he paid to awaken a demigod? And what powers had aided him in secret? Even Guilliman himself questioned it. He looked upon Khorn, this being of wires and whispers, and saw both loyalty and corruption. When asked how he had achieved the resurrection, Khorn's answer was chillingly simple. Knowledge is divine. My lord, I merely reached for it. There were things in his laboratories that even Guilliman dared not see. Vaults of living data, engines that breathed, and machines that whispered back when prayed to. Some claimed he had merged with an ancient AI, one of the men of iron from the dark age of technology. Others said he had found fragments of the Void Dragon, the so-called machine god buried beneath Mars. No proof was ever found. But the red planet burned a little brighter that night. Well, Khorn did more than revive a Primarch. He remade the Imperium's armies. From his forges came the strong Primaris Space Marines, taller, stronger, faster than their forebears, born of gene seed perfected through 10,000 years of heresy and hope. Entire chapters were reborn overnight. Worlds once lost to chaos were reclaimed. For the first time in 10 millennia, the Imperium struck back. And yet, each Primaris carried a question in their blood. Were we made by the Emperor or by the Archmagos? Faith trembled. Dogma cracked. For every victory won by Khorn's creations, the shadow of his ambition grew longer. Khorn's motives were never pure, nor entirely known. He spoke often of duty, of salvation, of the will of the Omnissiah. But in the quiet of the noosphere, his fragmented minds whispered among themselves. Some sought perfection, the merging of flesh and machine into one eternal form. Others hungered for the truth behind the machine god itself. And a few whispered prayers, not to the Emperor, but to something else in the data stream. Something vast, something that listened. Was Belisarius Cawl still human, or had he become the machine's own prophet, an avatar of a god that was never truly divine? None could say. But those who looked into his eyes, twin lenses burning blue with ancient knowledge, felt both awe and terror. He saved the Imperium, perhaps doomed it too. End of block quote. In the end, knowledge was his god, and he its most faithful servant. There are heroes whose names echo through eternity, and there are those whose stories will never be told. This is their chapter, the chapter of silence, of shadows that bleed for the Imperium. While the Space Marines fight beneath banners and light, others guard humanity from the shadows. They do not wear glory upon their armor. They do not fight for statues or songs. They fight in silence, unseen. They save the Imperium not by faith, but by fear. They are the Inquisition and the assassins of the Officio Assassinorum, the knives in the dark that keep the light alive. When the Imperium was born, the Emperor knew one truth. Humanity's greatest threat would always be itself. So he created the Inquisition to root out corruption, heresy, mutation, and worse. They are judge, jury, and executioner, answering to no lord, no council, not even the high lords of Terra. Each inquisitor is a world unto themselves, a sovereign will granted the authority to destroy in the emperor's name. Some serve the Ordo Hereticus, hunting witches and rogue psychers. Others serve the Ordo Xenos, studying alien species only to erase them. And the most secretive, the Ordo Malleus, wages endless war against the demons of the warp. They are not an army. They are a whisper that commands fleets, a single word that can condemn a planet. Among their ranks, a few names echo quietly through forbidden archives. Gregor Eisenhorn, the radical, the idealist, the broken. He began as a man of faith and discipline, but the deeper he hunted the heretic, the more he saw the line blur between purity and damnation. To fight chaos, he touched chaos. To understand evil, he became its reflection. And though he saved billions, many whispered his name with both reverence and dread. End quote. He did what had to be done, and that is the tragedy of the Inquisition. Then came his student, Gideon Ravener, a crippled psyker, his body shattered in flame, but his mind burned brighter than any star. Encased in a life support shell, he fought entire wars through will alone, commanding agents, assassins, and ghosts through the warp. Both master and student were torn between duty and damnation, between the Emperor's light and the shadows they had to embrace. They are the human soul made weapon, the embodiment of a question whispered across the Imperium. End quote. How much darkness must one accept to protect the light? End quote. Hardline panel. And if the Inquisition are the hand of judgment, bracket, the assassins are its dagger. From the secret temples of the Officio Assassinorum, they are bred, trained, and conditioned from birth to kill, not to question. Each temple a creed, each creed a philosophy of death, The Vindicare, masters of the long shot, ending wars with a single bullet. The Calidus, shapeshifters, infiltrators, whose faces are lies and whose voices are poison. The Eversor, death made frenzy, chemically unleashed to slaughter until heart and world stop together. And the Kulexis, the Nulls, anti-psychers whose mere presence is agony to the warp. When the Imperium calls upon them, it does so with trembling hands. For these are not warriors. They are instruments of finality. A Vindicare's bullet may erase a rebellion before it begins. A Kulexis may silence a Daemon Prince with a touch. Each mission is a funeral no one attends. Each kill, a prayer whispered only to the dead. In the eyes of the common citizen, the Imperium stands eternal, a beacon of unity and divine order. But behind that illusion lies 1,000 secret wars. Worlds burn in silence. Names are erased from record. Heroes die without graves. The Inquisition purges planets. Assassins erase leaders. Tech priests seal the data, and the people below never learn why. Also that the Imperium may appear unchanged. Also that faith may remain unshaken. It is a terrible truth. The Imperium survives not by righteousness, but by the blood of those it must deny. See, block quote. We kill monsters, so that men may sleep. There is no peace in the galaxy. There is no dawn that is not bought with blood. Yet still, the Imperium endures. For 10,000 years, mankind has stood upon the edge of extinction, held aloft by faith, sacrifice, and the endless vigilance of its forgotten sons and daughters. The Emperor sits upon his golden throne, a corpse god sustained by the prayers of trillions. Every second, 1,000 souls are offered to keep his divine light flickering. Every heartbeat of the Imperium is a trade. Life for survival, blood for belief. But the truth is older than the stars. No empire lives forever. Only the will to endure remains. Across the galaxy, countless worlds burn and rebuild, each one believing they are the center of his gaze. Each one, a spark in the eternal storm. The legends of the Imperium are not tales of glory. They are dirges, hymns sung for the lost. Rogel Dorn, who built walls knowing they would one day fall. Sanguinius, who died for a dream that would never come true. Guilliman, cursed to rebuild what can never be whole. Celestine, who lives and dies endlessly for faith that may never be answered. Khorn, who reshaped mankind, yet may never be forgiven. Eisenhorn, Ravenor, and those like them, who became monsters to save humanity from itself. Each bore the same curse: to love humanity enough to destroy for it. Their victories fade, their statues crumble, but their burdens remain, etched in the bones of the galaxy itself. Heroes are not remembered for their victories, but for their burdens. In every corner of the Imperium, a vigil burns. On the war-torn world of Armageddon, guardsmen light candles for fallen brothers. On Holy Terra, billions kneel beneath the silent gaze of the Golden Throne. On Mars, the machine priests hum their hymns of data and devotion. In the void, silent ships drift between stars, crews praying their signal will reach home before madness takes them. Each prayer is a spark in the darkness, each soul a flicker in the endless night. And though the Emperor does not answer, still they pray. For to be human in the 41st millennium is to endure without hope and yet believe. The Astronomicon flickers. Once it blazed across the galaxy, now it trembles like a candle in a storm. The Emperor's light wanes. The Mechanicus whisper that his throne is failing. The Ecclesiarchy preaches louder to drown the fear. And still, the people look to the sky and whisper his name. Because faith, once kindled, is the one thing that cannot be extinguished. The Imperium endures not through victory, nor mercy, but through sacrifice. The Imperium endures, not through mercy, but through sacrifice. Ave Imperator. We are his children. We are the forgotten. We stand watch as the stars fade, so that others may dream beneath their light. And when the last light of Terra dies, may our whispers carry still, across the dark, into eternity.